When the Industrial Revolution first came to Britain and the U.S., there was a high demand for labor. Families quickly migrated to the rural farm areas to the newly industrialized cities to find work. Once they got there, they did not look as bright as they did. To survive in even the lowest level of poverty, families had to have every able member of the family go to work. They led to the high rise in child labor in factories. Children were not treated well, overworked, and underpaid for a long time before anyone tried to change things for them. Children as young as 6 years old during the Industrial Revolution worked hard for little or no pay. Children sometimes worked up to 19 hours a day, with a 1 hour total break. This was a little bit on the extreme, but it was not common for children who worked in factories to work 12 to 14 hours with the same minimal breaks. Not only were these children subject to long hours, but also they were in horrible conditions. Large, heavy, and dangerous equipment was very common for children to be using or working near. Many accidents occurred, injuring or killing children on the job. Not until the Factory Act of 1833 did things improve. Children were paid only a fraction of what an adult would get, and sometimes factory owners would get away with paying them nothing. Orphans were the ones subject to this slave labor. The factory owners justified their absence of payroll by saying that they gave the orphans food, shelter, and clothing. Factory owners loved child labor, and they supported their reasoning with ideas that it was good for everything from the economy to the building of the children's characters. Parents of the children who worked were almost forced to at least approve of it because they needed the income. There were, however, some important figures that fought for the regulation, improvement, and or the abolishment of child labor. The first step in improving the conditions was in 1833, and the Factory Act was passed by the Parliament. This limited the amount of hours children of certain ages could work. Specifically, the children that were 9 to 13 years old were only allowed to work 8 hours of the day. The treatment of children in factories was often cruel and unusual, and the children's safety was generally neglected. The youngest children, who were not old enough to work the machines, were commonly sent to be assistants to textile workers. The people who the children served would beat them, verbally abuse them, and take no consideration for their safety. Both boys and girls who worked in factories were subject to beatings and other harsh forms. In the time of the Industrial Revolution, the children of families who moved to the crowded cities had their work situation go from bad to worse. In rural areas, children would have worked long hours with hard work for their family farms, but in the cities, the children worked longer hours with harder work for large companies. Harsher treatment and fewer rewards, and more sickness and injury came from the poorly regulated child labor.